Hollywood. 1940. The golden age of movies. Paramount, MGM, DeMille. It's Girl Meets Boy. She's Hedy Lamarr, a smart, ambitious, beautiful actress. He is a handsome, rebellious piano player and is living next door. They hit it off and fall into deep conversation. Because this isn't your usual Girl Meets Boy. This is Girl Meets Boy and Girl tells Boy about a revolutionary invention she's working on that she hopes will strike a blow to Hitler and help turn the tide of the war in Europe. Discovered by Hollywood, Hedy was soon box office dynamite, playing opposite legends like Clark Gable and Spencer Tracy. She was a megastar, known as the most beautiful woman in films. Not a problem for Hedy, who said it was easy for a girl to be glamorous. You just had to stand still and look stupid. But Hedy was far from stupid, and she had no intention of standing still.
Inventing was her hobby. She not only had a complete inventing table set up in her house, but Howard Hughes gave her a small version of the set of equipment, which she had in the trailer where she stayed in between takes in her motion pictures.
We don't know everything that Hedy invented, but we know that during the Second World War, she teamed up first with Howard Hughes, who was a great inventor himself. He was trying to create the fastest airplane in the world at that time.
When Hedy first met Howard Hughes, he was dating every Hollywood star, and she did date him.
Howard Hughes, of course, was a great airplane designer, so probably they had a compatible spirit with one another.
Howard Hughes wanted to build the fastest planes in the world so he could sell them to the Air Force.
I thought the aeroplane was too slow. I decided that's not right. They shouldn't be square, the wings. So I bought a book of fish, and I bought a book of birds, and then used the fastest bird connected it with the fastest fish, and I drew it together and showed it to Howard Hughes, and they said, "You're a genius." And
you did?
Yeah.
What Hedy Lamarr came up with was a radio signal between a ship and a torpedo that couldn't be hacked, that couldn't be jammed.
The two aimed to find a solution to this weakness by creating an impenetrable frequency to be used in torpedoes. But taking that idea from paper to prototype was the real challenge. One stepping stone to getting there was looking back at Antheil's ballet mécanique and the way in which he had synchronized multiple player pianos autonomously.
The key part of the symphony were these 16-player pianos, which had to communicate with one another and play synchronously.
Rather than sending radio communications on just one frequency, as was normally done, Lamarr came up with the idea of making the signal leap from frequency to frequency.
Frequency hopping. You couldn't jam it because you'd only jam a split second of it in a single frequency.
So frequency change, frequency hop, frequency hop, frequency hop.
That concept, secure radio communications, was brilliant.
Hedy's breakthrough idea was to transmit the signal in a pseudo-random pattern so it flitted continuously from frequency to frequency at split-second intervals. If a receiver was synchronized to exactly the same pattern, then it would pick up the entire message, while those listening would simply intercept the occasional blip. But how would the transmitter and the receiver work? Cue the piano player. Paper rolls slotted with holes, like those Antheil used to coordinate the automatic player pianos in his music, could ensure the frequency transmission would stay in sync. Put one in the transmitter, send the other off in the receiver, trigger them at the same time, and start broadcasting. The system would operate over 88 wavelengths, the same number of keys on a piano. Frequency hopping had been created.
Only a century ago, LA boasted the largest rail transit network in America. Long before freeways, long before bumper-to-bumper traffic, the Pacific Electric Railway moved LA. For 3 generations, its red cars defined the look and sound of LA's streets. Whistles blowing, wheels clattering, more than 1,000 miles of track. The red cars also drove LA's economy. This was how working-class Angelenos commuted to their jobs every day.
In 1941, to little acclaim, Orson Welles released his first ever film at just 26 years old. The film was a financial and critical flop, but has since been regarded as the greatest film ever made by many critics.
Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, says Life magazine, means more to the moving picture business than any other single name. Today's MGM Studio, spreading over hundreds of acres, is a far cry from the 40 acres of yesteryear. Then, 6 small stages and only 600 employees. Today, a teeming industrial center employing a daily average of 5,000 people, representing 170 arts and crafts. The 2 location lots contain atmospheric streets, jungles with elephants and other animals, a lake, foreign villages, a fleet of seaworthy ships.
Louis B. Mayer. Louis B. Mayer was the head of MGM Studios, and he had a particularly ruthless view of the way he treated the studio's stars. According to Louis, stars weren't born, but made. In particular, he made stars, and he felt that fact entitled him to a good deal of authority over them. If one of the stars at MGM didn't want to do what Louis wanted, they would face the studio head's wrath. That wrath would often see them forced to sit through one of his loud tantrums. However, he also sometimes got physical with the stars. On the surface, Louis presented himself as a calm and balanced person who the stars of MGM could look up to as a father figure. But that changed once you truly got to know him. Still, there were some stars who maintained respect for the mogul. After all, it was he who was in charge of MGM when the studio put out such classics as The Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind.
The largest aeroplane ever constructed. The Hughes H-4 Hercules. Built by the larger-than-life businessman and aviator Howard Hughes, the construction of this flying cargo ship was made more challenging by US wartime restrictions on metals, resulting in it being built entirely from wood.
It was intended to be a flying ship, and it was designed at a time when conventional shipping across the Atlantic was being sunk in very high numbers by German U-boats.
The unannounced decision was made during a taxi test, and with Hughes himself at the controls, the airboat reached an altitude of around 20 meters for a single minute.
In every important city throughout the United States are the inconspicuous headquarters of men whose job is to see rather than to be seen, to listen rather than to talk, and to act when they act with swiftness and certainty. They are the men of the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the most widely known of all U.S. law enforcement agencies. At the head of each of the FBI's 51 field offices is a special agent in charge, who is responsible in his district for the war against crime which the Bureau is perpetually waging. Today, the men of the FBI, whose activities extend out from Washington to the remotest corners of the land, are playing as vital a part in the nation's battle against crime as they played in the greater war against the armed forces of the Axis. Through its policy of working in cooperation with local police, The FBI, under its able director, is helping to raise the standards of law enforcement everywhere to meet the challenge of the post-war crime wave. And in the task of leadership that lies ahead of them, the men of the FBI are determined that they shall continue to be known by their motto: fidelity, bravery, integrity.